Decision paralysis happens when a person finds it very hard to make a choice, even if the options are not very different. Instead of deciding, they keep thinking, comparing, and delaying until it becomes stressful. This usually happens when there are too many options or when the person feels that the decision is very important. The mind tries to find the perfect choice, but ends up getting stuck instead. People experiencing this may go back and forth between options many times. They imagine different outcomes, think about possible mistakes, and try to predict what will happen. The more they think, the harder it becomes to choose. One reason this feels so intense is fear of regret. The person wants to avoid making the wrong decision so much that they struggle to make any decision at all. It can also create mental fatigue. Thinking deeply for too long uses a lot of mental energy, and eventually the brain becomes tired, which makes decisions even harder. Interestingly, even small decisions like choosing what to eat or what to watch can feel overwhelming during this state. It is not always about big life choices. Even though it feels like careful thinking, it often leads to no action, which can increase stress over time. Decision paralysis happens because the brain is trying to protect you from making a wrong choice, but ends up overworking itself. One of the main reasons is overload. When there are too many options, the brain has to compare more details. Each option has pros and cons, and the mind tries to analyze all of them at once. This creates a kind of mental traffic where thoughts start to slow down. Another reason is the need for certainty. The brain prefers clear outcomes, but most decisions do not guarantee a perfect result. When the outcome is uncertain, the mind keeps searching for more information, hoping to remove all doubt, which is usually impossible. Perfectionism also plays a role. If a person feels that they must make the best possible choice, the pressure increases. Instead of choosing something good enough, they keep searching for the ideal option, which may not exist. There's also the role of imagination. The brain starts creating different future scenarios for each choice. Some of these imagined outcomes can be negative, which increases hesitation and fear. Past experiences can make it stronger too. If someone has regretted decisions before, they may become more cautious and overthink future choices to avoid repeating that feeling. All of this happens at the same time, which overloads the decision-making process. Instead of helping the person choose, the brain creates so much analysis that it blocks action. Decision paralysis can affect daily life in ways that are not always obvious at first. One of the main effects is delay. Tasks that require even small decisions can take much longer than necessary. A person may spend a lot of time thinking, but very little time actually doing. This can lead to missed opportunities. When decisions are delayed too long, certain chances may pass by. The person might later feel regret, not because they chose wrong, but because they did not choose at all. It also increases stress. Having an unresolved decision stays in the mind and creates pressure. The longer it remains undecided, the heavier it can feel mentally. Productivity is often affected too. Since many tasks involve decisions, the constant hesitation can slow down progress. Even simple things can interrupt the flow of work. Another effect is reliance on others. Some people may start asking others to decide for them just to avoid the stress of choosing. While this can help temporarily, it can reduce confidence in their own judgment over time. Emotionally, it can create frustration. The person may feel stuck between options and annoyed with themselves for not being able to decide. Over time, this pattern can make life feel more complicated than it actually is because every choice starts to feel like a big one. Breaking out of decision paralysis is about reducing pressure on the mind rather than forcing a perfect choice. One helpful approach is setting limits. Instead of thinking endlessly, a person can give themselves a specific amount of time to decide. This prevents overthinking from continuing without end. Another method is simplifying options. Reducing the number of choices makes it easier for the brain to compare and decide. Even removing one or two options can make a noticeable difference. It also helps to accept that no decision is perfect. Every choice has some uncertainty and small risks. Understanding this allows the person to focus on making a good decision rather than the best possible one. Focusing on action is important too. Making a decision and moving forward often brings more clarity than thinking alone. Once action starts, the brain shifts from analysis to experience. Some people find it useful to rely on simple rules. For example, choosing the first option that meets basic criteria instead of comparing every detail. This reduces mental effort and speeds up the process. Trusting past decisions can also help build confidence. Remembering that many previous choices turn out fine, even if they were not perfect, can reduce fear of making new ones. Over time, as a person practices making quicker decisions, the brain becomes more comfortable with uncertainty and the feeling of being stuck starts to fade. Another important part of overcoming decision paralysis is rebuilding trust in your own judgment. When someone overthinks decisions for a long time, they often start believing that they are bad at choosing. This belief makes every new decision feel heavier and more stressful. To change this, it helps to start with small decisions. Making quick choices in low-pressure situations allows the brain to experience that nothing bad happens when you decide without overanalyzing. It is also useful to reflect on outcomes differently. Instead of judging a decision as good or bad, it helps to see it as a learning experience. Even if the result is not ideal, it still provides information for future choices. Another helpful idea is separating decision quality from outcome. A good decision can sometimes lead to a bad result due to factors outside of control. Understanding this reduces the fear of being wrong. People can also practice letting go after deciding. Constantly rethinking a choice after it is made keeps the stress active. Accepting the decision and moving forward helps the mind settle. Over time, these habits reduce the pressure around decisions. The brain learns that choosing is not dangerous and that most outcomes are manageable. As confidence grows, decisions become faster and less emotionally intense. The person no longer feels stuck and can move through choices with more ease and clarity. One final interesting part of decision paralysis is how people often look back on it differently later. When they're in the middle of it, every option can feel very important and heavy. The mind treats the decision as if it will strongly shape the future and must be handled perfectly. But after time passes, many of those decisions seem much smaller than they felt in the moment. People often realize that different choices would not have changed things as much as they expected. This shows that the pressure was created more by the mind than by the actual situation. The brain was trying to protect against possible negative outcomes, but exaggerated their impact. As people gain more experience, they start to see patterns. Most decisions lead to acceptable results, and even mistakes can be adjusted or corrected later. This understanding changes how future decisions feel. Instead of seeing them as final and risky, they begin to feel more flexible and manageable. In the end, decision paralysis is not about the choices themselves, but about how the mind reacts to uncertainty. Once a person becomes more comfortable with not knowing everything in advance, the need to overthink becomes weaker. This makes decision-making feel more natural and less like a mental struggle. At a deeper level, decision paralysis is connected to how people relate to control. The mind often wants to control outcomes as much as possible. Making a decision feels like locking in one path and losing all the others. This creates tension because the brain does not like giving up possibilities. When someone learns that not everything can be controlled, the pressure begins to decrease. Life naturally includes uncertainty, and no decision can guarantee a perfect result. Accepting this reduces the need to analyze every detail. Another shift happens when people start focusing more on adaptability instead of perfection. Instead of asking, what is the perfect choice, they begin asking, can I handle what happens next? This makes decisions feel less risky because the focus moves to handling outcomes rather than predicting them. There's also a sense of freedom that comes with this change. When the mind stops trying to control everything, it becomes easier to act, move forward, and adjust along the way. Over time, decision-making becomes less about avoiding mistakes and more about creating direction. Even imperfect choices move life forward, while no choice keeps everything stuck. This is why overcoming decision paralysis often leads to a stronger sense of confidence and independence. The person trusts that they can deal with whatever comes next instead of trying to solve everything before it happens.